Birthdays were supposed to be sweet. Mine started with sugar, flour, and a stubborn determination to make myself feel celebrated, even if no one else cared anymore. I stood in the kitchen, apron dusted white, humming softly as I stirred the batter. 49. That was the number this year. Not old, not young. Stuck in the middle with wrinkles around my eyes and a heart that felt heavier than it should. My husband, Thomas, hadn't said a word about my birthday. He hadn't in years. We lived like polite strangers under the same roof, exchanging nods instead of affection, meals instead of conversation. But today, I decided not to wait for him to remember. Today, I would bake my own cake, light my own candles, and whisper happy birthday to myself if I had to. The smell of chocolate filled the kitchen, rich and comforting, the kind of scent that used to bring Mia, our daughter, running when she was little. But Mia was gone now, off at college, calling only when she needed money. So it was just me, the oven, and the hollow quiet of the house. When the cake cooled, I carefully sliced it open to layer the frosting. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a piece of parchment that somehow slipped into the batter. But when I pulled it free, my breath caught. It wasn't random. It was a note, folded tight, hidden deep in the sponge. The word scrawled across it made my stomach drop. Get out of my house. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. The kitchen, once warm with the smell of chocolate, now felt suffocating. I reread the note 3 times. Same message. Same jagged handwriting. Not a joke. Not an accident. My first thought was Thomas. Had he done this? Slipped it into the batter when I wasn't looking? But he'd been at work all day. And besides, why hide a message in a cake when he barely looked at me to begin with? Then the darker thought slithered in. If not him, then who? I glanced around the kitchen, suddenly seeing it differently. The open back door. The faint draft I hadn't noticed before. The way the window latch seemed slightly bent. Was someone in my house? The knife slipped in my hand, frosting smearing across my wrist. My breath came shallow, uneven. I backed against the counter, clutching the note like a shield. The phone rang, slicing through the silence. I jumped so hard the knife clattered to the floor. With shaking fingers I answered, "Happy birthday, Mom." Mia's bright voice sang down the line. Relief and dread tangled in my chest. "Mia," I breathed, trying to sound normal. "What's wrong?" "You sound weird." I hesitated, staring at the note crumpled in my hand. My instinct screamed to tell her, but my mother's heart said no. She was hundreds of miles away, living her life. I wouldn't drag her into my paranoia. "Nothing," I lied. "Just tired." She chatted for a few more minutes, oblivious to the storm building inside me. When I hung up, the kitchen felt colder, emptier. I smoothed the note flat on the counter. The handwriting was messy, slanted, almost carved into the paper. Male? Female? I couldn't tell, but the words rang in my head like a curse. Get out of my house. Not our house. Not this house. My house, as if I didn't belong here at all. That night, Thomas came home late as usual, muttered a greeting, and disappeared upstairs without noticing the untouched cake on the counter. I didn't mention the note, not yet. I needed to be sure. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the paper burning in my nightstand drawer. And then sometime after midnight, I heard it, a floorboard creaking, not upstairs where Thomas slept, downstairs in the kitchen. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. The groan of an old wooden plank under weight. Someone was downstairs. I held my breath, straining to listen. Another creak followed, slower this time, like deliberate steps across the kitchen floor. My pulse hammered in my throat. Thomas was snoring beside me, oblivious. He could sleep through a thunderstorm, a burglary, even the end of the world. I slipped out of bed carefully, my bare feet sinking into the rug. I opened the drawer of the nightstand and pulled out the note. The words seemed to glow in the darkness. Get out of my house. Was this their warning before they came back to finish what they started? I crept to the top of the stairs, gripping the banister with trembling fingers. The house was silent again. No footsteps now, no creaks. Only the hum of the refrigerator floating up from the kitchen. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the note had already gotten inside my head, making me jump at shadows. But then a sound shattered that fragile hope. A faint thud followed by the squeak of the back door hinge. Someone was in my house. I rushed back into the bedroom, shaking Thomas awake. "Thomas, someone's downstairs!" He groaned, swatting my hand away. "What? It's probably the wind. Go back to sleep." "No," I snapped, panic sharpening my voice. "I heard them. The door—" He sat up reluctantly, rubbing his face. "Fine, I'll check." I followed him down the stairs, my heart clawing at my chest. The kitchen light was off, but moonlight spilled through the window, painting silver shapes across the floor. The back door was slightly ajar, swaying gently with the breeze. Thomas sighed. "You must have left it unlocked earlier." "I didn't," I whispered. My voice shook with certainty. "I checked it twice." He closed the door and bolted it. "No one's here. You're worked up over nothing." But as he turned away, I saw it. On the counter, beside the ruined birthday cake, sat another folded piece of paper. I snatched it up before Thomas noticed. My hands shook as I unfolded it under the dim light. This one was shorter, sharper. "Last warning." My stomach twisted. The words were the same jagged handwriting as before. I glanced at Thomas, who was already heading back upstairs, muttering about early mornings and too little sleep. He hadn't seen the note. Or maybe he didn't want to. I stood in the kitchen alone, staring at the message in my hands. Whoever left it had been here tonight. Standing in this very room, just steps from where I stood now. Watching. Waiting. I pressed the note flat against the counter. My breath shallow. They didn't just want me out. They were giving me a deadline. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat at the kitchen table with both notes in front of me, the ruined birthday cake beside them like a cruel joke. My mind churned with questions that had no answers. Who put them here? Why me? And why hide the threats in such twisted ways, inside a cake on my counter while I slept? By dawn, I looked like I'd aged 10 years. When Thomas stumbled down in his work clothes, he didn't even glance at me. "You're up early," he muttered, grabbing his travel mug. I wanted to slam the notes in his face, demand he admit something, anything. But a cold instinct stopped me. Something told me not to trust him with this. Not yet, so I said nothing. After he left, I scoured the house. Every window, every door. I checked for signs of forced entry, scratches on the locks, footprints outside. Nothing. It was like the notes had materialized out of thin air. By noon, exhaustion hit me. I slumped onto the sofa, staring blankly at the TV. That's when the phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" At first, nothing. Then a low voice. "Did you read it?" My grip tightened. "Who is this?" Silence. Then, "You don't belong there. Leave. Or next time, it won't be a note." The line went dead. I sat frozen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. My whole body trembled. This wasn't just some prank. Someone was targeting me, and they knew exactly how to get inside my home. I rushed to the window, yanking the curtains aside. The street looked ordinary. Cars parked neatly, neighbors' kids playing on bikes. But it felt wrong. Too still. Too staged. By evening, I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. I called Mia. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm. "Mom, did you like my birthday card?" I swallowed hard. "Mia, has your father said anything strange to you lately?" She paused. "Strange how?" "Like, about me." "About the house." "Not really," she said slowly. "But he's been different, quiet, distant." I almost told her about the notes, about the call. But I stopped. She had enough to worry about at school. "Never mind," I said softly. "Just take care of yourself." When we hung up, I felt more alone than ever. That night, I locked every door, bolted every window, left every light blazing. I sat up in the living room gripping the fire poker like a weapon. At 2 a.m., I heard it again. A creak. This time upstairs, near our bedroom. My blood went ice cold. The sound was soft, but it cut through the silence like a knife. A creak. Upstairs. I gripped the fire poker tighter, my palms slick with sweat. Thomas was upstairs asleep, or at least I thought he was. My chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths as I debated, run to him or run from him. Another creak. Closer this time. I forced myself up the stairs, each step a battle between courage and fear. The hallway stretched out like a tunnel, shadows pooling in the corners. I reached the bedroom door, nudged it open with the tip of the poker. Thomas was there, sprawled across the bed, snoring softly. Relief crashed over me. But it lasted only a second, because the sound hadn't come from the room. It came from the hallway behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just darkness. Then I noticed something on the floor near Mia's old bedroom. A folded square of paper. My pulse spiked as I crept forward, snatched it up, and unfolded it with shaking fingers. 3 words, scrawled in the same jagged handwriting. "You're too late." My knees buckled. I staggered into Mia's room, flicking the light on. The sight gutted me. Her posters were torn from the walls, shredded into strips. Her childhood stuffed animals, the ones I'd packed into boxes when she left, were scattered across the floor, slashed open, stuffing spilling like entrails. And on the bed, where her pillow should have been, was a knife. The blade glinted under the light, and taped to the handle was another note. Next time, it won't be toys. My scream tore through the house. Thomas jolted awake, stumbling into the room, his eyes wide. What the hell is going on? I shoved the note at him. Someone's been in here, Thomas. They left this. They're threatening our daughter. He read it, his face pale, but instead of panic, something else flickered in his eyes. Something cold. "Rosa," he said slowly. "You need help." The words slapped me harder than the note itself. "Help? Are you serious? You think I'm making this up?" He gestured at the wreckage. "You've been under stress. Don't you dare," I snapped, my voice breaking. "Don't you dare say I did this." His silence was damning. I realized then, either Thomas truly thought I was losing my mind, or he wanted me to. I clutched the poker tighter, my chest heaving. "Someone is in this house, Thomas. And if you won't believe me, I'll prove it myself." I stormed past him. The note clutched in my other hand, every nerve in my body blazing, because one thing was certain now: whoever was leaving these messages wasn't just playing games anymore. They wanted to break me, and I was one step away from snapping. I didn't sleep at all after finding Mia's room destroyed. Every creak of the house made my nerves jolt like live wires. Thomas had gone back to bed without another word, leaving me alone in the hallway with the shredded toys and that glinting knife. By dawn, the house looked the same as it always did. Sunlight spilling through the curtains, birds outside chirping. But to me it felt like a stage set, a fake backdrop. Somewhere behind it, someone was moving pieces. I gathered the notes and the knife into a shoebox, hands shaking. If Thomas wouldn't believe me, I'd keep my own record. I even took photos of everything on my phone. Proof. At 8, Thomas left for work without so much as a glance in my direction. The door shut and the silence returned. I called the police. When the officer arrived, I expected urgency, alarms, some kind of plan. Instead, a young man in a too large uniform scribbled on his pad and gave me a polite smile. "Any sign of forced entry, ma'am?" "No. Any witnesses?" "No." He closed the pad. "Could be a prank. Could be a misunderstanding. We'll file a report." "That's it?" My voice rose. "There was a knife in my daughter's room." "A knife?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "We can increase patrol in the area." "But without evidence?" I laughed bitterly. "You want evidence? Here." I shoved the shoebox at him. He took it gingerly, looked at the notes, then handed it back. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll note it in the file." And then he was gone, his car rolling quietly down the street, leaving me staring at the closed door, shaking. I sat at the kitchen table, pressing my palms into the wood until they hurt. It was clear now. No one was coming to save me. Not Thomas, Not the police. No one. My phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number again. Time's running out. I typed back before I could stop myself. Who are you? What do you want? 3 dots appeared. Then my house. My rules. My skin crawled. My eyes darted around the kitchen. Every window felt like a pair of eyes. I locked everything again, then went to Mia's room to clean up the mess. As I gathered the torn posters, something slipped from one of the slashed stuffed animals. A small, flat object. I picked it up. A flash drive. It was black, unmarked, small enough to fit on a keychain. I turned it over in my fingers, my pulse hammering. Someone had left this for me. On purpose. I went to my laptop and plugged it in. The screen flickered, then a folder appeared. Only one file inside, a video. My throat went dry. I clicked play. The screen showed grainy footage of my kitchen. Last night, me slicing the cake, pulling the note out, looking shocked. The camera slowly panned to the doorway where a shadowy figure stood, watching. And then, the video ended. Hands clamped over my mouth to stop the scream. They'd been filming me inside my own house. I sat frozen in front of the laptop. The video still burned into the screen. It felt like the walls of the house were closing in. Someone hadn't just been sneaking inside. They'd been living inside my space. Close enough to watch me, close enough to film. I slammed the laptop shut and stumbled back, clutching the flash drive like it was radioactive. My whole body shook. The first thing I did was call Thomas. He didn't pick up. I called again. Voicemail. I left a message, my voice trembling. Thomas, someone's been in the house. There's a video. Call me back immediately. Then I called the police again. This time I didn't bother with politeness. I have evidence. Actual footage. Someone inside my house. They sent another officer. Older, harder eyes. He plugged the flash drive into his own laptop. Watched the grainy video in silence. Where's the rest? He asked. The rest? The footage after this? Whoever recorded it probably stored more somewhere. I don't know, I stammered. It's all I found. He leaned back, scratching his chin. Looks like a cheap hidden camera. Could be anywhere. Do you mind if we search? Please, I whispered. For the next hour, he and a second officer combed the house. They found nothing. No cameras. No sign of forced entry. The flash drive remained the only proof. When they left, promising to review it further, the house felt even emptier. Thomas finally called back around noon. Rosa, what is going on? I swallowed hard. There's a video. Of me, in the kitchen. Last night. Someone was there, Thomas, he sighed. Rosa, I'm at work. We'll talk about this tonight. No? We'll talk now, I snapped. Someone's threatening me and you act like I'm crazy. He hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief, then hurled it across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. The house fell into silence again. My eyes roamed over the kitchen, the living room, every corner. Somewhere hidden there had been a camera. Maybe there still was. Then I saw it, a small hole in the baseboard under the cabinet. Tiny, perfectly round. I crawled on my hands and knees, peering inside. Behind the hole was a black dot, like a lens. My breath hitched. I grabbed a screwdriver from the drawer and pried the panel loose. It came off with a sharp snap. Inside was a small black device with a blinking red light, a hidden camera, and taped to the back of it, another note, "You're getting warmer." My scream echoed off the walls. I dropped the camera, backing away like it might explode. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would tear through my ribs. They'd been watching me, recording me, leaving me clues like it was a game, and I'd just found the first breadcrumb. I stumbled backward from the hidden camera, my back hitting the kitchen island. My hands shook as if I'd touched fire. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trespassing. They were orchestrating every second, leaving messages like riddles. I grabbed the camera off the floor and yanked the batteries out. The blinking light died, but it felt like a hollow victory. How many more were still hidden? My first instinct was to run. Grab my keys, leave, never come back. But the second instinct was colder, harder, find them. Whoever they were, they had turned my home into their playground. I wasn't going to run from my own life. I stuffed the camera and the note into the shoebox with the others and locked it in the hall closet. Then I did what I should have done days ago. Called Margaret. Margaret was my older sister, the only person who still answered when I called crying at odd hours. She picked up immediately. "Rosa? What's wrong?" I told her everything in a rush. The cake, the notes, the phone calls, the knife in Mia's room, the flash drive, the hidden camera. There was a long silence. Then her voice, steady but sharp. "I'm coming over." "No, don't," I said quickly. "If they're watching, they're already watching," she cut me off. "You're not alone in this anymore." Half an hour later, she arrived, her coat zipped up to her chin. Her eyes darted around the house as she stepped inside. "This is insane," she muttered. "You called the cops, right?" "They don't believe me." I shoved the shoebox into her hands. "This is all I have." She flipped through the notes, her face tightening. "Someone's trying to push you out. The question is why?" We sat at the kitchen table, the half-eaten cake still sitting between us like a prop from a crime scene. Margaret's fingers drummed on the wood. "You sure Thomas isn't involved?" I hesitated. "I don't know anymore." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Check the basement." I blinked. "The basement?" "Always the basement," she said grimly. "If someone's been sneaking in and out, that's where they'd stash equipment." We armed ourselves with flashlights and headed down the creaky stairs. The air was cool and damp, smelling of dust and old paint. Cobwebs clung to the beams. At first glance, everything looked normal. Boxes, tools, a stack of old magazines. But Margaret moved with purpose, knocking on panels, pulling at loose boards, and then she froze. "Rosa." I followed her gaze to the far corner. Behind the water heater, hidden from view, was a duffel bag. Margaret knelt and unzipped it. Inside were more cameras, tiny ones like the one I'd found in the kitchen, and next to them, bundles of cash, rubber-banded tight, and on top of it all, another note. "Almost home." Margaret's face went pale. "They're not just watching you. They're preparing for something." My heart pounded in my ears. "What does that mean?" She zipped the bag shut. "It means you're in the middle of someone's plan, and you're running out of time." We stared at each other in the dim basement light, the weight of the discovery pressing down on both of us. For the first time since this started, I felt something colder than fear. I felt hunted. We hauled the duffel bag upstairs like it was radioactive, setting it on the kitchen floor between us. Margaret tore off her gloves and stared at it, her face a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Cameras, cash, notes," she muttered. "This isn't random, Rosa. This is a setup. Someone's treating you like a mark." I sank into a chair, my head spinning. "But why me? Why this house?" Margaret paced, her arms folded tight. "You've been here how long?" 12 years? Titles in both your names?" "Yes," I whispered. Her eyes flicked to the ceiling, like she was piecing together a puzzle. "Thomas stands to gain everything if you crack. You leave, you give up the house, he sells, he pockets it all." The thought made my stomach twist. "You think this is him?" "I think it's convenient," she said darkly. I stared at the duffel bag. "But what about the calls? The flash drive?" "How would he—" "Easy," she cut in. "Pay someone. Hire a creep. Plant cameras, leave notes, push you to the edge, make you think you're losing your mind until you run." Her words sank in like stones in water. I remembered Thomas's dismissive tone, the way he brushed off the notes, the way he refused to see any of it. "Margaret," my voice trembled. "If you're right, then he's not just cheating. He's destroying me on purpose." Margaret put a hand on my shoulder. "Then we catch him at it. How?" She crouched by the duffel bag and pulled out one of the cameras. "We turn his own game against him. Hide this one where he doesn't expect it. Watch who comes and goes." It was a desperate plan, but it was all we had. That night, while Thomas was at work, we planted the smallest camera in the living room, angled at the front door. We placed another by the back door. Margaret rigged the motion alerts to her phone. "Now we wait," she said. The hours crawled. We sat in the dark, the glow of Margaret's phone the only light. At 11:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. Motion alert. She tapped the screen, and there it was, the back door swinging open. A shadow stepping inside. My heart stopped. The figure moved through the kitchen slowly, deliberately. Not Thomas, taller, broader, dressed in black. They went straight to the cabinet under the sink, crouched down, and reached behind it. We watched, frozen, as the figure pulled out a new note and slipped it onto the counter. Then they turned and disappeared out the back door like smoke. Margaret stared at me, her voice a whisper. "They're still coming. Right under your nose." I forced myself up, every nerve on fire. We crept to the kitchen, hearts hammering. The new note sat on the counter, ink still wet. "Tomorrow you're gone." My knees nearly buckled. Margaret caught my arm. "They're giving you a deadline," she murmured. "And they're not bluffing." I looked at her, my voice hollow. "Then tomorrow we catch them." The night passed in fragments of shallow sleep and jolts of panic. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. Margaret stayed awake, pacing the living room with her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. By dawn, the air felt electric, charged with the promise of something breaking. I moved through the house like a ghost, brushing my fingers along the walls I no longer trusted. This was my home, my kitchen, my hallway, Mia's old room, yet every inch of it felt stolen. At 7 a.m., Margaret slammed a mug of coffee down in front of me. "Today," she said. "We're going to catch them. No more waiting." I stared at the steam rising from the cup. "And if we don't?" She met my eyes, her voice flat. "Then you leave. Tonight. With nothing." The words stung because they were true. We set up early. Margaret hid her phone feed on the laptop, rigged to record everything. We positioned ourselves upstairs, just far enough from the stairs to hear anyone coming in. The cameras we'd planted last night hummed quietly, unseen. At 11:15 a.m., Thomas called. "Working late," he said casually. "Don't wait up," my heart squeezed. "Thomas," I said softly, testing his tone. "Someone left another note. They said I'd be gone today." A pause. Then his voice, low, irritated. "Rosa, this is exactly what I've been talking about. You're imagining things again." I hung up before he could say more. Margaret arched a brow. That man is hiding something. The clock ticked toward noon. My pulse kept pace with it. Then Margaret's phone buzzed. Motion alert. We both lunged for the laptop. There it was, the back door opening. The same shadowy figure stepping inside. This time, though, they moved faster. Straight through the kitchen, down the hall toward the basement. Margaret whispered, "We've got them." We crept down the stairs, hearts thundering, the floor cold under our feet. From the kitchen doorway, we could see the figure crouched at the duffel bag in the corner, rifling through it. Margaret lifted her phone, recording. "Hey!" she barked. The figure spun around. It wasn't Thomas. It was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, shaved head, heavy jacket. His eyes were flat like dark stones. In one hand, he held another folded note. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He smirked. "Doesn't matter who I am." His voice was deep, low. "Only matters who sent me." "Thomas?" Margaret snapped. The man didn't answer. Instead, he dropped the note on the floor and backed toward the door. "Deadline's tonight," he said softly. "Be smart." Then he slipped out the back, vanishing into the daylight. Margaret snatched up the note. We unfolded it together, our hands trembling. "Last night in the house." I stared at the words until they blurred. "They're going to force me out tonight." Margaret's jaw tightened. "Then we end this tonight. One way or another." We sat at the kitchen table with the new note between us, the sunlight glaring off its sharp letters. "Last night in the house." It felt less like a warning and more like a verdict. Margaret's voice was steady, but her hands were trembling. "They're telling you they're coming tonight. That's not a scare tactic. That's a plan." I stared at the note, the jagged writing cutting into my brain. "But what are they planning? To scare me out? Or something worse?" Margaret stood pacing. If it's Thomas, he's either trying to drive you insane until you leave, or he's setting up something darker. Either way, tonight's the night. I swallowed hard. So what do we do? She turned to me, eyes sharp. We don't wait. We fight back. We spent the afternoon preparing. Margaret checked every window, every lock. She positioned the hidden cameras so that every angle of the house was covered. We hid one at the top of the stairs, another behind the kitchen curtain, and one facing the back door. Then we waited. The house felt like a loaded gun. Every tick of the clock was another round chambered. At 6 p.m., Thomas called again. I'll be home late. Don't wait up. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Convenient, she muttered. I ended the call without replying. At 8 p.m., the neighborhood settled into its evening routine, porch lights flicking on, dogs barking, distant TVs glowing through curtains. But inside our house, everything was still. I stood at the window watching shadows crawl across the lawn. My breath came shallow. What if they come in shooting? I whispered. Margaret put a hand on my shoulder. Then they walk into a camera trap and the police catch them red-handed. We'll have everything recorded. At 10 p.m., the first alert buzzed on her phone. She tapped the screen, and there it was. The back door opening. The same man stepping inside. But this time, he wasn't alone. Another figure slipped in behind him, shorter, wearing a hood. Together they moved quickly, confidently, like they owned the space. Margaret hissed, "Two of them! They're not here to leave notes this time." I gripped her arm. "Call the police." "I am," she whispered, dialing with one hand while the other held the phone feed steady. We crept to the top of the stairs, peering down. The two figures stood in the kitchen, one rummaging through drawers, the other scanning the room. Then the taller one pulled something from his pocket. A lighter. My stomach dropped. "They're going to burn it," I breathed. Margaret's eyes went wide. "They're going to torch the house to push you out." I couldn't breathe. My home, my life, everything, about to go up in flames. Margaret pressed the call button. "Police!" she hissed into the phone. "They're here now. Arson. Send units." Downstairs, the hooded figure moved toward the hallway, carrying what looked like a small gas can. Margaret grabbed my arm. "We have to get out, now," but my feet rooted to the floor. This was my house. My kitchen. My daughter's room. My life. I clenched my fists, whispering, "Not tonight." Margaret stared at me. "Rosa, they're not taking it from me." We watched as the taller man flicked the lighter open, a small flame dancing in the dark kitchen. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and shouted down the stairs, "Get out of my house!" The two figures froze, their heads snapping up toward the stairs. And then everything happened at once. The flame from the lighter flickered in the intruder's hand as his head jerked up toward me. For a split second, time stood still. The kitchen below, Margaret clutching my arm, my own voice echoing through the house like a gunshot. Then the taller man sneered, "So you are home." He pocketed the lighter, his other hand disappearing into his jacket. Margaret yanked me back, whispering harshly, "Upstairs. Now!" But my body refused to move. This was it. The moment they wanted, me cornered, afraid. The hooded figure stepped closer, raising the gas can as if it were a weapon. "We said last night in the house." "Guess you don't listen." Margaret's phone buzzed in her hand, the dispatcher still on the line, but she didn't dare speak. We could hear sirens faintly in the distance, too far away. I forced my voice not to shake. "Who sent you?" The taller man smirked, his teeth glinting. "Ask your husband." The words hit me like a fist. Before I could respond, Margaret shoved me toward the bedroom. "Move!" she hissed. We bolted down the hall, slammed the door, and pushed the dresser in front of it. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear. The footsteps came fast, heavy. They thundered up the stairs, stopping outside the door. A fist slammed against it. "Rosa, open up!" I backed away, clutching the poker from under the bed. "Stay away from me." The hooded voice called out next, mocking sing-song. "You can't hide forever." He doesn't want you here. Nobody does. Margaret had the phone pressed to her ear. They're breaking in, she barked. Where are you? The units are 2 minutes out, the dispatcher replied. 2 minutes felt like an eternity. The taller man's voice dropped to a growl. If you won't leave, we'll make sure you never stay. The sound of metal scraping against wood filled the air. They were trying to force the lock. The dresser shook as they rammed against the door. Once, twice. Margaret grabbed the lamp from the nightstand, raising it like a weapon. If they come through, we fight. My chest burned with terror and fury. This was my home, my life, my family's memories. And Thomas, if he had orchestrated this, was going to answer for every second of it. The door cracked at the frame, splinters flying. One more hit and they'd be in. And then, faint at first but growing louder, the wail of sirens filled the night. Red and blue lights flashed through the curtains. Tires screeched outside. The pounding on the door stopped. A rush of footsteps retreated down the stairs, the back door slamming open. Margaret sagged against the wall, gasping. They're running! I dropped the poker, my arms trembling uncontrollably. They were really going to burn it down, I whispered. Outside, voices shouted, police swarming the yard. But inside, all I could hear was that one line, echoing over and over, ask your husband. The police stormed the house, boots heavy on the floorboards, radios crackling. Red and blue lights bled through the windows, painting the walls in frantic flashes. Margaret and I stood in the bedroom doorway, shaking, while 2 officers secured the upstairs. They're gone, one officer confirmed. Slipped out the back before we got here. We'll canvass the neighborhood. Margaret gripped my arm, her voice sharp. Show them the bag. The cameras. Everything. I led the officers to the basement, my knees weak with every step. The duffel bag still sat behind the water heater where we'd left it. One officer unzipped it, shining his flashlight on the bundles of cash and tiny cameras. He muttered, "This isn't just intimidation. This is organized." Another officer crouched beside the bag, pulling out the latest note. "Last night in the house." His eyes flicked to me. They weren't bluffing. I hugged myself, the room spinning. They said, "Thomas sent them." The words hung in the air like smoke. Margaret's jaw clenched, but the officers exchanged skeptical looks. "Do you have reason to believe your husband's involved, ma'am?" one asked. I thought of Thomas brushing off every note, every warning. Him working late, never here when the intruders came. His cold dismissal when I begged him to believe me. "Yes," I said hoarsely. "I do." The officers traded another look. Then the older one sighed. "We'll need to bring him in for questioning." "Where is he now?" "At work," I said. My voice cracked. "Or so he says," Margaret muttered under her breath. "Probably meeting his hired thugs." The officers left with the duffel bag as evidence, promising to keep patrol cars outside the house all night. When the door closed behind them, the silence pressed heavy again. Margaret turned to me. "Rosa, if this is Thomas, he doesn't just want you out. He wants you ruined." I sank into a chair, tears spilling over. "Why? Why would he do this?" "After everything." Margaret knelt in front of me, gripping my hands. "Because people like him don't think in love, Rosa. They think in ownership. He wants this house, this life, but without you." Her words carved into me like glass. At midnight, the patrol cars idled quietly outside, their headlights cutting through the street. Margaret insisted on sleeping in the living room with me, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The house felt calmer, but my heart didn't. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like someone waiting to strike. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. "An unknown number again," I answered with shaking hands. "Hello?" Silence at first. Then a whisper, "You should have left tonight." My chest locked. "Who are you?" I cried. The voice chuckled, low and cruel. "Doesn't matter, tomorrow. You'll be gone." The line went dead. Margaret sat up, wide-eyed. "What did they say?" I whispered the words, each one heavier than the last. "Tomorrow. I'll be gone." The words haunted me long after the call ended. "Tomorrow you'll be gone. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling as if it could give me answers. Margaret drifted in and out of restless sleep beside me, but I never closed my eyes. By morning, the patrol cars were gone, replaced by the hollow quiet of the neighborhood. Sunlight poured through the curtains, but it didn't feel like safety. It felt like a countdown. Margaret made coffee, her movements sharp, impatient. "We can't just sit here waiting. They're escalating, Rosa. First notes, then threats, now arson. Whatever tomorrow means, it won't be good." I rubbed my temples. "The police are useless. They'll just file another report and leave us here like bait." Margaret slammed the mug down. "Then we make the first move." Her words echoed in my head all morning. When Thomas finally came home around noon, I almost couldn't look at him. He set his briefcase down like it was any other day. His tie loosened, his eyes avoiding mine. "How was your night?" he asked casually, as if strangers hadn't nearly burned our home to the ground. Margaret folded her arms. "Funny you should ask." She launched into everything. The break-in, the men in the kitchen, the lighter, the gas can, the notes. Thomas blinked at her, then at me. "And you think this was me?" "Don't play dumb," Margaret snapped. "They said it was you. Who else stands to gain from Rosa losing the house?" Thomas's face hardened. "You've both lost it. Rosa, I've been patient, but this paranoia—" "Paranoia?" I cried, shoving the shoebox toward him. "Look at this. Look at what they left us." He rifled through the notes, his jaw tightening. But instead of surprise, I saw something else flicker across his face. Recognition. Margaret saw it too. "You know exactly who's behind this," she said. Thomas slammed the lid shut. "Enough! I won't be interrogated in my own home." My voice broke. "Then whose home is it, Thomas? Mine? Yours? Or theirs?" For a heartbeat, silence filled the room. Then Thomas grabbed his briefcase and stormed upstairs without another word. Margaret exhaled sharply. "He knows. He damn well knows." I pressed my hands to my face, the tears hot against my palms. Every part of me screamed that she was right. That night, I barely ate. Barely moved. The weight of tomorrow pressed on me like a storm cloud. Around 11 p.m., Margaret checked the cameras one last time. "Quiet," she muttered. Too quiet. We sat up in the living room again, blankets and flashlights at the ready. The silence dragged on, thick and suffocating. At exactly midnight, my phone buzzed. No call this time. Just a text. "Look under the stairs." My throat closed. I showed Margaret my hands shaking. "Don't," she whispered. "It's a trap," but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, we crept to the basement. The wooden steps groaned beneath our feet. At the bottom, Margaret shone her flashlight along the stairwell until the beam caught something wedged between the boards. A small envelope. I reached for it with trembling fingers. Tore it open. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was me, sleeping on the couch. Taken last night, on the back in the same jagged scrawl, "Tomorrow you don't wake up." The Polaroid slipped from my fingers and landed on the basement floor, face down. My body locked in place, ice spreading through my veins. Someone had stood in my house only feet away while I slept. And I hadn't felt a thing. Margaret picked it up carefully, her face pale in the beam of the flashlight. "This isn't just a threat anymore," she said, her voice low and urgent. "It's a promise." I gripped the railing to steady myself. "Margaret, they could have killed me already." "Why didn't they?" She stuffed the photo back into the envelope. "Because they want you broken first. They want you terrified before they finish it." We climbed the stairs in silence, every creak of the wood sounding like a countdown. Back in the kitchen, I locked the envelope in the shoebox with the other notes, though it felt pointless. Proof didn't matter when the clock was ticking down to your death. Margaret paced, muttering to herself. "We can't wait for the police. We can't trust Thomas. We need leverage." Her eyes flicked to me. "We catch them on camera tonight, faces clear, no masks. And then we show the police so they can't ignore it." I nodded numbly. But deep down, a darker thought gnawed at me. What if Margaret was wrong? What if the police saw the footage and still did nothing? What if Thomas was pulling the strings and everyone else was just a pawn? By 2 a.m., exhaustion dragged at my body. but fear kept my eyes wide open. Margaret sat with her phone in hand, waiting for the cameras to trip. The house was silent, too silent, every tick of the clock hammering into my skull. At 2:37, her phone buzzed. Motion alert. We scrambled to the laptop. The feed showed the back door inching open. A figure slipped inside, moving low, fast, like they knew exactly where the cameras were. But this time, they weren't alone. 2 more followed. All in black, faces covered. One carried what looked like a crowbar. Another carried rope. My stomach flipped. Oh God, Margaret. They're here to take me. Her hand tightened on my wrist. Not if we move first. We watched as the figures spread out, one into the kitchen, one down the hall, the third creeping toward the stairs. Margaret whispered, "They're coming up, now." I grabbed the poker from under the couch, my hands slick with sweat. Margaret armed herself with the lamp again, both of us trembling but ready. The first boot hit the stairs. Then another. The creak of weight getting closer, Margaret mouthed silently, "On 3, 1, 2, 3. The bedroom door burst open. A man lunged inside, swinging the crowbar. Margaret screamed and swung the lamp, the crash echoing through the house. I jabbed the poker wildly, connecting with a shoulder. The man stumbled back, cursing, but the second figure was already behind him, rope in hand, and in that split second, over the chaos, I realized something. They weren't here to scare me. They were here to take me. The rope brushed against my arm as the second intruder lunged. Instinct took over. I swung the poker with all my strength, the crack of metal against bone ringing out. The man howled, dropping the rope, and staggered back into the dresser. Margaret grabbed my hand. "Run!" she shouted. We bolted down the hall, our feet slamming the hardwood, the intruders' curses echoing behind us. I could hear them giving chase, the thud of boots closing in. We tore down the stairs, nearly tumbling over each other. The third figure leapt from the kitchen doorway, arms wide, but Margaret shoved the lamp into his chest with a grunt. He stumbled just enough for us to slip past. The front door was only feet away when a hand clamped around my hair, yanking me backward. I screamed, swinging the poker wildly until it connected. The grip loosened, and I stumbled forward, nearly collapsing. Margaret yanked the door open, and there they were. Police cars. Sirens wailing, red and blue lights flooding the yard. Officers surged up the porch steps, guns drawn. "Drop it! On the ground!" The intruders froze mid-motion, caught like rats in a trap. One tried to bolt toward the back door, but a cop tackled him before he made it 2 steps. Another was dragged down the stairs, the crowbar clattering to the floor. The rope hit the hardwood, useless now. Margaret pulled me into her arms as the house filled with shouts and chaos. My body shook violently, every ounce of adrenaline crashing into me at once. Minutes later, the intruders were cuffed and shoved into squad cars. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching my house, my broken, violated house, glow under the flashing lights. A detective knelt beside me, his voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Rosa, we'll need you to come down to the station." They confessed, I blinked. "Confessed?" He nodded. "They were hired, paid to terrorize you until you left the house." My throat tightened. "By who?" The detective's eyes darkened. "Your husband, Thomas." The world tilted. The air left my lungs. Margaret squeezed my shoulder, her jaw clenched. "I knew it," she spat. I shook my head slowly, tears burning my eyes. He wanted me gone that badly?" The detective sighed. "He was planning to sell the property. He stood to make a fortune. But first he needed you broken, gone, out of the way." The truth hit harder than any blow those intruders could have landed. All those nights of fear, all the notes, all the threats, they weren't the work of strangers. They were my husband's betrayal made flesh. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in muted pink, I realized something. Thomas hadn't just tried to take my house. He'd tried to take me, my sanity, my life. But I was still here. Margaret pulled me close, her voice steady in my ear. "You're stronger than he ever thought you were, Rosa, and he's going to pay for every second of this." I nodded, staring at the place I had once called my safe haven, It was broken, scarred, full of shadows. But it was mine, and no one, not Thomas, not his hired ghosts, not anyone, was going to take it from me again.